This is the Dallas Morning News.
The presenting sponsor for the Intersections podcast is Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman. Built on a culture of winning, these trial lawyers have proven experience, elite preparation, and relentless focus in the areas of commercial, intellectual property, and employment litigation. Visit Lynn LLP to learn more. And thank you so much to the Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman Group for all you're doing to support the Intersections podcast. Headquartered in Dallas, Texas, Arcus Golf is a premier owner and operator of nearly 90 private resort and daily fee courses in the U.S., including Cowboys Golf Club, the world's first and only NFL-themed golf club, and 8 other courses right here in the DFW Metroplex. Arcus is an innovative industry leader providing unrivaled lifestyle amenities that complement exceptional golf offerings. To learn more, visit arcusgolf.com, and thank you to the Arcus team for all that you do to make Intersections happen. This episode is sponsored by Glidden, a general contractor serving North and Central Texas. Glidden builds mission-critical projects, private developments, and medical facilities with a Level 7 customer service model and mindset. They eliminate traditional job site friction, replacing industry apathy with sympathetic discipline. Advanced pre-construction planning ensures your project is delivered with operational predictability. When your board demands certainty, choose a partner that matches your urgency. Outplan and outwork the status quo at GlydenIndustries.com. This episode is sponsored by the Family Capital Podcast, a podcast devoted to helping families pass down and inherit wealth in a thoughtful manner and explore everything related to running a family office. The Family Capital Podcast is produced by Brownlee Wealth Management, a fee-only Texas advisory firm and one of the early pioneers in the fixed fee movement. Stop paying 1% and learn more about Brownlee Wealth Management. You can find more information and their podcasts at bwmplanning.com. Thank you to the Brownlee team for all you're doing to support Intersections.
Kyle, Colossal may be one of the more fascinating, amazing firms in the entire world today. Ben Lamm's founder and CEO, and just talking about the idea of bringing back woolly mammoths. Plus, what was fascinating to me was not just that, which gets the headlines, but it was all the other things that are happening in that firm.
Well, we touch on also the human side, the human and morality side of de-extinction. And this idea of how do you bring back an animal from the dead? And so Ben walks us through the scientific approach that he took, all of his previous exits and businesses that were all successful. And we have an unbelievable conversation about really the future of life and the growth of life as we move forward over the next couple decades.
Just amazing.
Yeah. Tune in. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, today's going to be really fun.
Buckle up. This is going to be fascinating. Ben Lamm. Ben is a successful entrepreneur, has had 5 different efforts that have all turned out exit very successfully.
Yeah, they're going pretty good.
But I don't think any of them match what you're doing now. It's colossal.
Yeah.
It is the firm that is really pushing forward on de-extinction. So think woolly mammoths, dire wolves, those sorts of things. Pretty successful venture, too. In the space of 5 years, gone from 0 to $10 billion valuations. So a lot of people out there seeing not only fascinating science, but a real economic
I think
benefit.
it's massively undervalued. So I'm a little disappointed in our valuation. I think that, we are building one of the most important companies on earth. I see a lot of other companies that are worth $1 trillion. I'm like, well, those are interesting, but I think what we're doing is more important. So, I love our investors, but I do think we are I think we're the best trade in the world right now. Okay. So, yeah.
Well, we're going to get into de-extinction. We're going to get into woolly mammoths and all that. But on the front end, just tell us what Colossal is trying to do, and maybe more important than that, why you're doing it.
Yeah. So Colossal is the world's first de-extinction and species preservation company. And our goal is to build an end-to-end pipeline using computational biology and AI, genome engineering and cellular engineering, and then developmental biology and even things like artificial wombs one day to build this end-to-end pipeline that we can use to save critically endangered species, as well as bring back some of these iconic species, all while advancing technologies that can then be used in a myriad of other use cases for programmable life, right? Everything from like drought-resistant cattle to super plants to microbes that can eat plastics to even drugs and new therapeutic designs and discovery methodologies for us to come up with ways to help human healthcare.
And unlike an academic scenario,
Yeah.
and I guess fitting with your entrepreneurial background, you're really developing a synthetic biology platform, a system that pulls all the pieces together.
Yeah, and we are the synthetic biology platform in company in the world. I personally hate, I didn't name it, I personally hate the category of synthetic biology because it makes it feel like we're doing stuff like putting plastic into like genomes or something, right? Like when you hear that, like it is. But that has been the framing that the industry has taken, right, of synthetic biology, and so I guess we have to fall within what the world has accepted. So we are that leading synthetic biology platform, even though I hate the phrase synthetic because I think it ushers in this like. This thing that makes people that think that it is less organic than it really is.
Okay, there's a lot to cover, but let's start with how you got here a little bit. Grew up in Austin.
Grew up in Austin.
Single mom.
Yep.
Single mom.
Yeah, always been a Texas guy.
A single mom, but you had both your grandfather and uncle were pretty significant influences.
Yeah, huge influences in my life. My family, my grandparents lived in Decatur, Texas. And so my uncle was from Dallas, had a lot of friends in Dallas, went to Baylor. So I was always in.
And he was the private equity.
Yeah, he's in private equity, yeah. And so always kind of around private equity, always around kind of financings and kind of long-term growth models. So I'd kind of been around that my whole life. I did travel a lot as a kid. So I got out of Texas on vacations. I got out of Texas when I saw, like, my parents were divorced when I was very young. So I saw my dad internationally, but mostly spent most of my childhood growing up in Texas. So I love Texas, and I'm Texas kind of through and through. And, through those generations and after Baylor, I got really into software, got really into designing businesses, moved back to Austin, built a couple companies there. In college, I lived in California for a little bit, lived in New York for a little bit, but always kind of came back to Texas.
So, and
it's hard to beat. Texas is just hard to beat.
I want to touch on one thing. The influence of your mom, being a single mother. How did that spark academic curiosity? How did that kind of get you down the road of where you are
my mom
today?
was a very hardworking person, right? And she still is, right? She works very, very hard, worked multiple jobs. She was an educator, so I was always really excited. She was a Spanish teacher. She was very good at teaching other people Spanish. I am not great at Spanish, so I had a moderate rebellious streak as it relates to learning that, which I really regret, right? So we're actually trying to teach, I've got young kids now, and we're actually teaching them Spanish at a very early age. So, and so that's something that I'm good enough to kind of like, wade around in Central and Latin America, but I'm not perfect at it as to the level of bilingualist that I should be. Right. So that was a huge mistake that I made in my life. But yeah, she was very, very influential, and always the pursuit of education was high on my list.
Well, and a lot of young folks say they're going to be an entrepreneur. They're not going to do the traditional college, that sort of thing.
I did not say that. I'm just massively unhirable.
But you did do the traditional college, kind of cut a deal with your family.
Finance,
But went through finance and accounting, which again, you don't think accounting.
Yeah.
But you said that was a great background.
But I did that because my uncle went to Baylor, and my uncle was finance and accounting. And, my uncle was kind enough to pay for my college, right? And so I was very, very fortunate. One of those people that, didn't have college debt. But I had, there were some rules that went into it, like, I don't think he would have let me be an art history major. Not that there's anything wrong with art history majors, but there were some parameters and negotiations, right? Because I think his view was that, hey, you're going to get a degree, but I got to know you're going to get something that, worst case scenario, you can have a job. Yeah. I do think that he probably thought I was moderately unemployable as well. So.
Good background, though, for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it was great, right? It like teaches you, the basics and fundamentals, like you don't learn in college, no matter, whatever college you go to, from kind of Wharton to Reed College. You probably don't learn how to, like, all the things you learn in like the hard knocks of life, right? And so, you don't learn everything about financing or term sheets or acquisitions, but you learn enough, right? And I think that if you learn the fundamentals of like how to read an income statement, how to understand a balance sheet, how accounting works, I think a lot of those principles made me smarter when it came to thinking through different levels of finance.
And you started early. Actually, at Baylor, you started your first venture out of an internship, and hired your professor.
Yeah. Hired my professor. He was great.
I hope that got you. Great.
Yeah, he was great. Dr. Moshinsky, he was great. And so we had this thesis that why can't e-learning be sexy? And, it was moderately productive. Yeah. I went to my first e-learning conference and we printed black T-shirts with, you could not do this now, by the way. I don't even know what you can do now. But like we printed black T-shirts with like the old school trucker logos. Remember those old school trucker logos that had like the mud flaps? We don't even have to say what's on the mud flaps, but we had those in pink on black shirts that had like, why can't, e-learning be sexy? And like then everyone else had like, white shirts with blue that were like Learning Co. Yeah. Right. And so
y'all stood out.
Yeah. So we definitely stood out. And people didn't know who we were, and our like shirts, like everyone's like, can I get one of those shirts? Can I get one of those shirts? And that was a time where you could put anything on a shirt and, not get yelled at or sued or canceled. And so it was fun, and it was a fun shirt, and everyone got really excited, and it got really viral in that community. And so we grew that company, ended up selling it. And I'm always kind of attracted to kind of the next thing. And so I was very attracted to this concept of mobile. Yeah. So started a mobile company before mobile was really as big of a thing as it is now. That was just
when the mobile apps were really
when they were coming out, right?
Yeah, so 2010-ish plus or minus?
So we started in 2010, grew it, moderately irreverent brand. The company's called Chaotic Moon. So once again,
such a great
had
name.
Nothing to do with mobile, right? Yep. Every other company was like XYZ Mobile, and they truly, truly hated us. And we probably earned it. Our tagline that we fought for years with the USPTO office on, trademark office on, was "We're the best." Like, once again, had nothing to do whatsoever with mobile. And then we also trademarked all your mobiles belong to us, because it was in it was a pop culture thing. So so anyway, we built this really cool company, and I got to work with a lot of really great people. It was fun.
Well, tell us about a couple of those projects that you built at Chaotic Moon, because y'all had some pretty neat success ultimately selling to Accenture.
We built the like fundamental like streaming platforms, right? And so at the time, Disney Movies Anywhere. At the time, all the stuff for Nat Geo. We basically worked with all the streaming providers, FX, everyone except Hulu, everyone except pretty much Netflix, right? So we worked with pretty much everyone, and we built the fundamental streaming platform. We also built the fundamental platform that 8 of the 9 features that we built went into Apple's newsstand. And so we built the first digital publication called The Daily back in the day. And we're actually building it for the iPad 2 on the iPad 1, where we had to like fly out to Cupertino and like, test it on devices in acrylic that like we couldn't go back, right? Yeah. And so it was not the best debugging model in the world, but it was fun, and we worked on a bunch of those projects. And then we had a lab that did really interesting things. Yeah. We had a robotic shopping cart that would follow you around the store with near field communication, where you could put things in there. If you didn't know where an ingredient was for like spaghetti, you'd look it up, and then it would turn around, and you could then follow the grocery cart there. So we built a lot of cool stuff like that. We worked with pizza. So there was a point where like Starbucks, Pizza Hut, all the big mobile apps, there was a point where if you had an iPhone or an Android device, there was like a 98% probability that on your home screen was one of our apps, right? And so
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a fun company. It was great. It got bought by Accenture. Accenture does what they do. They completely ruined it and destroyed it.
And you stayed with Accenture a little bit after that.
Well, for 6 long months, it felt like 60 years. I have some grays now. I probably have 0 grays if I wouldn't have spent 6 months at Accenture. But I also got to watch like what corporate America. I learned so many things of like what you don't do when you buy a company, and I also learned very quickly what groupthink looks like. So I was not a fit for Accenture. They were not a fit for me. We quickly mutually came to that conclusion.
But even before you left, you had started Team Chaos. Gaming.
We'd spun out Team Chaos from Chaotic Moon, which actually was very awkward for me, right? Because when I was fired, I was fired from Accenture. Like let's mutual. Let's just call a spade a spade. I was fired because I was honest with people about things that they didn't like to hear. It's like telling people the truth sometimes doesn't always work. And so then after that. I was, when you're no longer, when you sign separation agreements with organizations, they don't always let you come back to your office. Unfortunately, my gaming company was in my office. And it was subleasing part of our office. So it was a little awkward. I would literally have to like meet with my team at the hotel bar across the street.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was ludicrous. The whole thing was dumb. And so with Team Chaos, we had built, my partner and I, Andrew Busey, who's arguably one of the smartest product people in the world, we had built like a handful of pretty dumb, bad games. That was the mobile days, right? Mobile gaming days. And then we built Dragon Academy, which really worked. Yeah. It was a top-performing, top-grossing game. And then Zynga bought the company. And so it was an interesting time, right? Because I just sold Chaotic Moon. Was doing this weird hybrid model of work from across the street for my team, that company got bought within 6 months of the other acquisition.
So how do you convince? I mean, in a field where games come and go, volatility. How do you convince Zynga to put a good number against that?
So I think I think they were really interested in our technology. They're really interested in the team. Andrew Busey had previously sold a company to Zynga. They loved a lot of the team and whatnot. So, Andrew ran into one of his buddies that had just been bought by his company, bought by Zynga. They were very excited, and this is like that Texas ecosystem, right? They were and Andrew had a historical relationship with him. They were very excited about the capability set and some of the games that we were building, and so it just kind of organically happened.
So mobile app gaming. And then all of a sudden, a SaaS platform.
So like, if you build mobile, you should then build something to destroy it. And so we built a conversational...
Which is being destroyed today.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally.
So we built a conversational intelligence platform called Conversable, which actually means easy to talk to. And we had this thesis that, bots were going to replace, why do you need 100 apps on your phone? Why can't you just talk to something with intent, with natural language processing and intent recognition? So we built this pretty robust messaging bus layer that connected all these different endpoints in a way where we could understand in natural language people's requests. And so we thought conversational intelligence, powering conversational commerce, content, and customer care would be huge, right? We pre Elon buying Twitter and making it X, we had a thesis that this isn't really a media platform. It's we thought Twitter should be more of a call center. It was like the place that people went to bitch. Yeah. So we were like, oh, if we integrate with these, but you also, if you're XYZ brand, you don't want people on your feed just complaining all the time. So how do you quickly slide them into DMs, answer their questions, but then not have to go build a giant, if you looked at T-Mobile and a lot of people that really pioneered online customer care on social media, they had hundreds of people they were funding on doing that. So we were trying to do that all automated.
So 2018, you sell that.
Yep. We sold that.
And then, of course, we've gone now from mobile apps, gaming,
SaaS.
So the natural evolution is to go into the defense industry and infrastructure, right?
Satellites and defense, like spam. Yeah, I mean,
where did that idea come from? Where did
care. I was really excited, and it was actually a point of contention, right? Because Conversable was growing quite well. Andrew continues to remind me that we had more of the fundamentals around the LLMs than anything is.
Sure.
So Andrew's like, if we stay the course, I mean, yes, we probably missed it by like $1 trillion, but whatever. But we were like the first in that category, which is interesting. So like he was correct in his thesis. We were just we were just early, and I don't know. I just got really passionate. I met the former chief innovation officer of U.S. Air Force and then Space Force. I met a couple of people that were working in
So did they
defense.
give you the idea then?
Well, they just were talking about some of the problems. And what was interesting was, so I went to a couple non-classified briefings in both Washington and in Colorado at the time U.S. Space Command before it became Space Force and spun out of Air Force. And to me, it was weird that like a lot of stuff didn't work like movies. Like it's like everything you see in the movies, like it doesn't work like that. And so the idea that, the proliferation of AI before it was sexy, integrated into important decision-making, layering in dynamic views of how you present data. Like how do you present data in a multimodal way where someone in a command center, someone in a Humvee on a tablet, or someone eventually in something like an Eagle Eye, which Palmer and them have invented, how does something come up in a heads-up display? Yeah. How do you take this data, give just-in-time actionable data at the right time was pretty interesting. And then all of that has to go through kind of a decision-making tree that ends up being really more a decision-making web. And they were in this a point where they were looking at what was called at the time the Advanced Battlefield Management System, which then later became cloud-based command and control. So how do you take and kind of joint all-domain warfighting? How do you combine all of that? And how do you combine all that in a way where you can also be presenting data? And
so it really was mobile apps. It really was gaming.
Yeah,
it's
taking all of these things, right, and whatnot. And so we integrated with a lot of different platforms, Palantir, others, and it went really well. And then no one was as focused on space, so we started focusing heavily on space. We bought a deployment platform, hardware deployment platform, and we were rolling out stuff for low Earth orbit, LEO, as well as cislunar. So, and then this small pandemic happened, and so that was interesting. And at the time that it was an interesting time because, like, right when the pandemic was happening, we had a big defense company wanting to put money in us, and we had another big defense company that wanted to buy us, and we're like 2 years old.
Yeah,
and we scaled from like 0 to like 40 million in revenue, like
pretty quick.
Within like the first year.
And 2023 sell out to private equety. But now let's do.
But I left.
You were gone.
I left. Yeah. The pandemic, made a lot of people rethink their priority set. And I'm really big on investment. I'm really big on innovation. We didn't have the same views. I think it's the best way to say it. The board and I didn't have the same views on our, like we were doing non-persistent heads-up display on curved surfaces, like stuff that like people are now doing, we were doing 5 years ago, right? And so 7 years ago. And so like the stuff that was coming out of, go look at the stuff that was coming out of our research lab, and the decision was made by the board that they really wanted to focus on just the software aspects of it. They wanted to sell the space hardware. They wanted to because at the time during COVID, like launches weren't happening.
Yeah.
So we had this huge team that was just sitting there and like, and I tried to convince people that, hey, space isn't going anywhere and it's all going to come back. And then there's a backlog. In our space hardware business was ludicrously profitable from an EBITDA perspective, but it's not when you're not putting stuff in space, right? Yeah. And so there was just, a difference of opinion in terms of like how we think about the priority set and innovation. And so I said, look, we'll refocus the business 100% on the software offering, right, which was our core revenue driver. I'll bring in a new CEO that checks the boxes that you like, right? Vista equity, older, wears collared shirts. So cool. You'll like him. And I'm going to go do my own thing. Yeah. And that's when I started pursuing this.
Okay, enough of the boring 5 startups, all successful exits, all things are
All very
pretty-
painful. Yeah.
But
All startups are
let's
painful.
go back now to 2008.
Yeah.
There's a guy by the name of Dr. George Church.
Yep.
Synthetic biology, probably
Arguably the father.
preeminent.
Yeah.
I'd
He's
argue
the
the
guy.
father of synthetic biology,
So
right?
in 2008,
Yep.
he comes out at a conference and talks about, let's bring back a woolly mammoth.
yeah.
In 2013.
I wasn't at that conference either.
No, in
Yeah.
2013.
Yeah.
But then in 2019, you do have a conversation with him.
Yeah, I do.
Tell
yeah.
us about the
I
conversation.
actually reached out to George because I was interested in my view at the time with Hypergiant was based on the trajectory and just kind of reading the tea leaves pre-pandemic that it was highly likely at some point that we were going to be bought.
So you were following him? Were you following his literature?
No,
Were you
no,
following,
no, no, no.
How did
I
all
didn't
that
know him.
introduction happen?
I didn't know him.
Yeah.
I just reached out to him.
Okay.
Christina Libby, who's been a long-term employee of mine at various companies, we were chatting and I was talking about synthetic biology. She goes, I read this really interesting paper by this guy, George Church. You should talk to him. And I was like, oh, great. And so she got me his contact information.
Cool.
I just cold called him and asked to talk to him. I was more interested in the kind of acceleration of AI, eventually the kind of advent and onboarding of quantum and how software AI access to compute was going to accelerate genome engineering. I was like conceptually more of like a thought leadership like conversation, right?
But you asked him a question.
Yeah, I did. I was like, well, then he started telling me all this crazy stuff that he's got going on in his lab that was quite interesting. And I was like, man, they got a lot going on. That's all really cool. I was like, and then I thought to myself on the call, I was like, why does anybody come up with any ideas? Why don't they just talk to people like George and just like take one of these to market? So I asked him, I was like, of all the stuff you're working on, and I don't know if he loves to admit this because he has a lot of postdocs. I was like, what if you had one project to work on, what would it be? With unlimited capital, what would it be? And he was like, I would work to bring back the woolly mammoth. And he went through all the reasons why. And I was like, well, that's pretty crazy. And then, but that happened at the end of the call. And so like the call was over. And I was like, and I had not seen that talk he had given, right? I had not seen some of that stuff.
Interesting.
And so then I was actually at my Austin house at the time when I did the call. And then I ended up staying up all night reading about all the stuff. And there, no matter what, whether it was on the 60 Minutes or Colbert Show or whatever, a podcast or just interviewing New York Times, whatever it was, there was this consistent message of this through line of the mammoth, right?
Yeah.
Not that it almost felt like he wasn't pitching it. Others would bring it up. Others would bring it to him. But he would light up and get excited and talk about it, right? Because I think if you're the father of synthetic biology, of read-write technologies, and that seems to be like the ultimate expression of the technology, right? So I could see his allure to it. And I called him back the next day. I was in his lab within a week.
Amazing.
And I was like, I was in this debate mode where like, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll just like fund his lab. Maybe I didn't know I'd turn it into a real company. And then, we were very, very excited about it. And then, this pandemic happened. So, he's focused on his stuff. I was focused on my stuff.
So that was kind of the 19 to 21. Started the company in 21.
Yeah, 19 had the meeting, first meeting in 19. Met with him in early 2020 again in Boston and Harvard. And then we just stayed in touch. And then towards the end of 2020, I was like, like the things that I care about Hypergiant are not going to be the focus of the company going forward.
Sure.
So it's just not for me anymore, right? And I'm one of those people that once you make those decisions, you should just trust your gut and go with them, right? And the board wanted me to was there a way that we could navigate it? And there just wasn't a path that was going to work for me.
Okay, I got to stop you before we dive fully into Colossal.
Yeah.
10 years, multiple exits. Give us some life lessons. Give us some employee lessons. Give us some things that you learned. You said that they're hard.
I don't know if I'd wish entrepreneurship really on anyone. I think it's hard. I think it sounds good. And I think that I think there's been very few articles over the years for the vast majority of entrepreneurs, people that have succeeded, people that have failed, people that have done okay in the middle. I think that there's an over glorification of the pursuit, and I'd argue that it's more a series of character flaws than really even a pursuit. And so I think lessons learned from it are, you need high degrees of resilience, and there will be times where there will be personal relationship and health and hours of sleep. There will be trade-offs that are obviously that are often not talked about. Sure. Most people are like, "Oh, entrepreneurship's easy," and these guys came up with an idea in a garage, and they made $1 trillion, and they live on a boat, and that is I think the massive overglorification, right? Like very few people tell you that you're told stupid. You have I literally sometimes, even at Colossal, have to deal with this. We have more conservation projects going on than de-extinction projects. We open source all of our technologies. We employ 260 scientists.
In fact, you spun out Bioform
and
then went open source on it.
Yeah. And it's and we open source all of our technology for conservation. And I still even have to have conversations with journalists that I launched the foundation with, right? That know I put $100 million into foundation and open source. That then 3 weeks later, we'll write a story that's like, Colossal just doesn't care about conservation. I was like, I launched the foundation with you. How can you, where is ethics in your journalistic integrity? And so what I'll say is this is not.
There's other folks that would share that view too.
This is not for the thin-skinned, right? And it's like if you see Christopher Nolan's movie Memento, and you can wake up every day and forget what happened to you the day before, this is probably the right job for you, right? Because if you just get the absolute shit beat out of you, and then the next day you're like, hey, it's Tuesday, what's going on today, right? So I think if you have this chemical deficiency in your brain that forces ultimate optimism, this may be the right job for you, right?
As you said earlier, you're the first de-extinction. So, and we want to get into some of the great stories.
Yeah.
But let's set it up a little bit on just kind of that operating system process. So what you do is take a genome that's something close, and you were the first one that did non-human, a full genome.
Yeah.
So you take, regardless of what the species is, take that, try to identify within that genome the differences between the existing and the extinction. And then basically not replace all of it, but edit out the chromosomes to get the traits to match that. Somewhere close in there.
Very, very, very close, right? And so, we look at this, and some people agree with this philosophy, some people don't, like software, right? And so, when we go write software that goes into a weapon system or a satellite system, like in my previous life, if you can do something in 30 lines of code, or you do something in 3,000 lines of code, you're always going to want to do it in 30 lines of code. It's more efficient. You're going to have less bugs. You're going to break less stuff. So we spend an enormous amount of time, an enormous amount of money really doing that comparative genomics and really looking at compute, right? To understand there's we'll give direwolf is a great example, right? Because we did it. It's alive. It's healthy. And so what's interesting is that direwolves and gray wolves are over 99% the same, right? Yeah. But in that 1% that's different, or 0.5%, that's still a million changes, right? And so, but what are the changes that matter, right? And so, another example of that is, and I think this is quite interesting.
Well, and to jump in there, so gray to dire is 14 chromosomes and 20 edits.
Well, it seems 20
small.
edits.
Is that a right?
20 edits on 14 genes, right? So not on the genes. So 20 edits on 14 genes, and that drove all the core phenotypes or physical attributes that made them serve their ecological function in the environment, and also gave them that expression that we can also visually see. That a child can look at it and say, well, that looks like a big wolf, right? And so, but it is the authentic changes from the direwolf, right? And so we spent a lot of time on the authenticity of working through those changes, right? And so, if you look at a mammoth, for example, we have 104 mammoth genomes across 1.3 million years. Here's what I can tell you I think this is quite interesting. They're very, very different. But what's interesting is the parts of the genome that are conserved that are very, very similar to each other are the ones that are driving those core phenotypes, right? And so if you were to have living cells, which we don't, from each one of those 104 genomes, and were to be able to clone them and bring them all back, they'd probably virtually look very, very similar. They'd have a lot of the core phenotypes. But under the hood, per se, they'd be very, very different because of that 1.3 million years of genetic divergence, right? Even though those core areas are conserved. So we spent a lot of time in before OpenAI and Anthropic got to the point where they are today. They were great at writing term papers and answering, but they were not great at like doing ancestral state reconstruction maps and modeling that towards the close living relative. So we had to go build a lot of those bespoke things. Now we're leveraging the latest models across our enterprise systems to build the right level of communication, and because there's so many projects going on, there's so many people. This is kind of a worldwide initiative. We have so much going on internationally. Mm-hmm. Everyone's always traveling. So building that fabric across our enterprise systems, so that like our chief biology officer in Australia doesn't have to go into 3 different systems to get an answer on one experiment, right? So that's where we're deploying these kind of like the existing frontier models.
Okay. Woolly mammoths is, but let's finish on the dire wolves.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating. Yeah. So it sounds pretty easy the way we just kind of laid it out.
Yeah. It's definitely.
But all of a sudden now you've got to find the DNA from an extinct species. And the dire wolves are 12,000 years
12,000, 13,000 years ago is when they went extinct. People are like, oh, but I've been to La Brea tar pits. There's 3,000 direwolf skulls on the walls and it looks amazing, right? But because of heat and acidification, there's not really any viable DNA.
It deteriorates quickly.
Very quickly, right? The minute out of your body starts deteriorating. If things could die in cold, dry places, that's the best.
Make it easy,
right? Yeah. And so we took a 73,000-year-old skull that was found in a riverbed and a 13,000-year-old-ish tooth that had previously been sampled, that was actually found in a cave, which is a great place to find stuff because it's cold and dry, and resampled it. Beth Shapiro, our chief science officer, used her ancient DNA lab at UC Santa Cruz to resample it, and we got about 13x coverage. What that means is we got 13 passages of the full genome. Before that, I think it was something like that exact tooth, I think it yielded something like 0.3 or 0.4 of it. So it didn't even get a full passage. So we got a lot. You really need, and there's no exact science on this, but you need to be, at least in our experiences, if you can get somewhere between 10 and 30x, you have a reasonably good shot at probably bringing it back. And we did.
So you did.
So we did. Rimus and Remus were our first two, and then and Khaleesi, our girl. So we went through this whole process and founded that at the time. It's also interesting. We as humans like to think in boxes. We like to put things in boxes, and so we thought, and once again, this is the beauty of science, unless you disagree with people and then people get mad at you. But it's like, the data at the time before we did this 6 years ago, based on that 0.3 or 0.5x of the genome, suggested that direwolves are actually close related to jackals, right?
Huh.
In a picture, like this is why Instagram exists, right? Like a picture's worth 1,000 words. So an incredible paleo artist who we were friends with did a beautiful picture, and because of Game of Thrones, this was popular.
Yeah.
Well, 6 years before we started the company, right?
Yeah.
And they published this paper about direwolves were not even wolves; they were jackals, right? And believe it or not, the press loves salacious headlines, and so they did this. And this is before we started the company. So there's a general belief in like the zeitgeist of humanity that direwolves, the percentage of people that knew direwolves even existed and weren't just a Game of Thrones or Magic the Gathering thing, were actually jackals. And at the time, based on the data they had, that's what it kind of suggested.
Yeah.
But as you get more data, you can learn more. And, there was a time, like when I was growing up, everyone was like, water's the most magic thing in the world. Like, water's amazing. Well, and that's what makes Earth amazing. We'll never find water again, maybe in the solar system. That's what makes life. It's in Venus. It's on the moon.
Yeah.
It's underground in Mars. We didn't have to go one planet over to find it. There's a whole moon around it. It like it's crazy. There's a whole ocean moon here, right, in the solar system. So it's like we just learn more stuff and we get to revise our thesis. So with more data, we found that direwolves were actually closely related to wolves, which kind of makes sense. But then,
the gray wolf.
The gray wolf. And so when we came out with the direwolves, and we actually found out in the DNA that they were most likely white, right? And so I can't say that all direwolves were white, but what I can tell you is that with the 2 samples we have from 2 different locations with 60,000 years of genetic divergence, they were both white. Yeah. So either the luck of the draw, we both got the white ones, or most likely the Pleistocene wolf was white, right? And so George R. R. Martin was very excited about that, by the way, when we told him. And so it's so that, but then because of this picture, when we launched the direwolf, we had people like, direwolves were closer to jackals. Like, no. That was correct at the time based on the data, but they're like, but we've all saw this picture. Like, but you didn't see a picture. You saw an artistic rendering, right? So, I mean, we spent months educating people on it. And that's one of the cool things about this company is that we take the stance that we don't have to persuade anyone. Yeah. Let's just give people the data and educate them and see what they decide.
So what were the first couple of weeks like with the 2 wolves? Like, tell us about those experiences.
It was awesome.
And they're a year and a half now?
Yeah. So they're a year and a half, 2 years. So they, it's interesting because like you're seeing something that's like never been seen before. Totally. It's really cool. Like when they were born, when most wolves are born, they have a little bit of hair and they're typically grayish, blackish in terms of very light hair. These things came out like fuzzballs, white. I mean, they look like baby polar bears. And we're like, this is going to get interesting. And so, and it was really like the whole experience was just really, really cool. But then there's this other side of you, which is like, you're also like you have this life, you're very excited about it. You have an incredible team of women and men that have worked on it for so long, but then you also can't talk about it. Yeah. Right. So you're in this moment where you're like, okay, let's monitor them. Let's make sure everything's healthy. And then let's figure out how and when we're going to tell the world. So then you're also like, you're super excited about something that then you can't tell anybody about.
Take Kyle's question though. And you kind of answered it from a science standpoint. But Kyle was talking about it from a personal standpoint.
Yeah.
So you held
what's the personal feeling?
held this. Oh, yeah. Well, and the personal feeling.
I actually wasn't there during the birth.
Well, but the personal feeling I'm getting to is not only that life, but for the first time you heard a sound that probably hasn't been heard for 10,000 years.
So,
and something that nobody has even come close to holding. I mean,
So I'll give you a couple stories around this. So I was not present, and people still have a hard time with this statement, but I was not present when they were born. I was in London. So I was on FaceTime, though.
That's amazing.
Our chief science officer, Beth, who's amazing, she was actually in London with me, and it was late. She was asleep, so she totally missed it, which I love saying, because it's funny and mean. But she was asleep. I was on FaceTime, and you're like, I now have kids, and it's kind of like I'm like virtually in the operating room, right? And so you're like watching this, and you're like, is it a lot? Is it okay? Is it breathe? Like and I'm not even there, right?
And you used a surrogate.
Yeah, we use a large dog surrogate. So you're kind of like watching all this through our chief animal officer, who's in the room, scrubbed out, but you're not getting data. You're getting data in near time ish, right? Because like he's observing, and it's like everything okay. It's like it was very stressful. Like it's very stressful, and then. He's like, they're quite big and they're healthy. And so then there was, so you have these emotions, then you have this relief, right? There's a component of relief because that they're healthy. You know that they were with the right people to care for them. And so it's high stakes, high emotions during that, right? And then fast forward, when you get to hold them and whatnot, they also, Rogan actually talked about this. They do have they have a unique feeling to the texture of their fur, but they also have a unique smell. They really do. And
Interesting.
And so you're holding them, you're like in bottle feeding them, and they're not aggressive like in a mean way when they were puppies, but they're aggressive like wanting the food, right? So I mean, they were quite strong even as small puppies. So so it was a really cool experience. And then when I'd come home from the preserve, my dogs would like lose their minds, lose their mind.
thought of that,
Like
yeah.
it's like, I don't have cats, but like, how people are always talking about how catnip, like the dog, like cats go crazy.
Yeah.
It's like my dogs were drug addicts and I had like some drug on me, and they've never behaved like this except for the times that I come back from the preserve. It's
They jump on you. Do they get fearful?
Yeah, no, not fearful. Like just like crazy, like running around in circle, like excited, smell like. But not like if you go like hang out with someone with a dog or a cat, right? Like they're like they'll smell you like, oh yeah, you're a traitor, right?
Right.
But like this was not that. They're like it's another thing, right? So that was really interesting. And then we heard the howl. The howl was like super awesome. We got it on film. But then I was actually with one of our investors, Peter Jackson, who did Lord of the Rings, and he's the one that said it. We were showing him stuff because we're working on the Mo with him. We were at his he and his partner Fran's house in Wellington. And we hooked it up, like old school, like hooked up with HDMI to the TV. Mike Doherty was like, hey, let me show you something. Mike, we showed it to him, and he's like, I got chills, is what Peter said. And, Peter's like an incredible filmmaker, incredible storyteller. And he's like, you have to show this. Like, this is what you have to lead with. He's like, and then he said that. He goes, this is the first howl that anyone's heard in 10,000 years. He goes, this is what you should lead with. This is what you should, and it was his opinion. He's like, this is what you should show the world. And he's totally right? Because it is highly emotional, it's highly exciting, but it makes it very real. But it also is a shared experience, right? And so that was his idea. We didn't know what we were going to show from a pictures and a video. We're still working through all that. And he's like, and this was like not like professionally shot, right? This was like iPhone, and they're like, that's what you need to show, and we did, and that was part of like the launch package.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Incredible.
On wolves, that's the de-extinction.
Mm-hmm.
But red wolves, you've been working to take an endangered species and use the same systems work that you're doing.
Exactly.
Talk about the red wolves.
We want to apply all of our technologies to conservation, and I think that once again, leading by example in actions speak much louder than words. And so for us, we wanted to work with red wolves before we just open sourced the technology and said, you guys should go work with red wolves, right? We wanted to actually do it ourselves, right? And so the red wolf is the most endangered canid in the entire world, which is a travesty, right? Because this is not a developing nation. This is, we have the resources and technologies. When you think about America and you think about this old school West, and you think about bears and trouts and bald eagles and wolves. Yeah. Well, the only wolf that is endemic only to the United States, being the red wolf, is critically endangered. There's only a handful of them left in the wild, and so there's only 12 founder lines, meaning that they're lines that have the genetic diversity that you need to then go down and push that through into and create more and more wolves that have enough genetic diversity, so you don't have a bottleneck and that leads to inbreeding and abnormal issues and developmental issues and non-viable pregnancies. And so we really wanted to use these technologies. And one of the technologies that we use, because wolves are endangered, in the direwolf project, is we were able to isolate this type of cell called an endothelial progenitor cell. So think of it as like the inner layer to a vein, right? That are partially differentiated, so they're not quite as good as stem cells, but they're not fully formed. And so you can get them in the blood, so it's massively non-invasive, right? You can then isolate them, grow them, and edit them quite well, right? And so using that same technology and using blood from a handful of wolves that the number one red wolf geneticist in the world is Bridget von Holt at Princeton, who works on the project. she has identified a group of wolves that are actually more red wolf than the ones in the North Carolina recovery population. But no one is taking her serious because sometimes people, I don't understand like why we can't just go where the data takes us, but apparently there's just emotions attached to some of these things. And so so she's been so she gave us some of these samples. We were able to clone from it, and we made 4 red wolves that are genetically diverse from those 12 founder lines. So we were able to increase the founder line population by 33% using the same technologies that we invented on the path to the direwolf. And that's one of the things that I think, it was underrepresented in the direwolf announcement, which we expected. But if you look the week before on Google, red wolf searches were 0. After it, it was hundreds of thousands of searches. So then it grew to millions. So it did. So the messaging of the importance of saving the red wolf and some of these technologies could be applied to conservation, specifically in wolves, in red wolves. That did get out. It got out at a fraction of what the direwolf.
An important public sector type of issue. So you go to the federal government and say, "Hey, look what I can do," and they, of course,
they embrace it, right? And so we worked with the last administration, the Biden administration. We worked with the Trump administration. This administration, we sometimes get feedback that's quite negative on how could you do this, right? Like, and we're like, well, we are looking at loss of biodiversity, which is a real issue. We're going to lose up to 50% of biodiversity in the next 25 years. When you're looking at that level of like 6 mass extinction, you can't just go put your head in the sand for 4 years because you don't like every decision or you don't like Trump, right? And so we take this view that, we're going to work with every administration, including this administration and the next one. Sometimes that makes us unpopular. And and I don't understand that because you would think that that good ideas can come from anywhere, right?
But you got pushback the first time, basically saying,
the
bureaucracy.
We got pushback during the Biden administration, not from the conservation groups, right, within the Biden administration. They were actually very supportive of us. We got pushback when we were talking about cloning the red wolves with some of the workers in Fish and Wildlife that were appointed during the Biden administration that said that they needed to go spend, they want to go spend $22 million, not with us, on a feasibility study on could we clone red wolves. We're like, here's a puppy.
Yeah.
Right. And so we it was not, that was hard. Right. And so, once again, it's about understanding your audience. And what we learned about this administration is they like, innovation, not regulation. They like technology. They like public wins. This administration loves making money, and they love saving money, and they love telling the taxpayer we saved you money, right? They love that. So if you look at the principles of this administration, we said, okay, well, if we're going to work with this administration, I don't know if I can get this administration to care about XYZ wolf. I don't know if I can do that, right? Sure. I don't know if that's in our capability set, but I can take them a solution and say, hey, look, let us make red wolves for you. We'll do it for you and the American people for free. We're using innovative technology that got Time 100 most innovative of the year, and we're going to do it for free for the taxpayer.
And importantly, it's not a one-off. You can productionize it.
We can productionize it. And so we did that. The administration leaned in and said, great, go do that. Under the Endangered Species Act, every administration, Republican, independent, if there was ever one, and Democrat has to, it's not like optional. They have to spend money on recovering these species. And
what we've been is adding to it. We haven't been taking
anything off, right? And so some of our meetings got it was very painful for us because we viewed it as we had this huge win for conservation sciences where we had an administration that wasn't going to give us money, but was going to give us all the authority to go do this for free. And we became the victim of this politicization of the administration because then they had this view where if you ask us, is de-extinction a replacement for conservation? We're like, no, we should keep doing everything we're doing. This is just a new tool. We got politicized in a couple articles that went very viral where it was like, Colossal's view is that de-extinction is a replacement for conservation. That's like what the headline said. And then like page 40 of the article is it's like Colossal did not, when asked about this, the Colossal chief animal officer and CEO said it is not a replacement. It's like, but why is that on
Why do you
page?
lead with this?
Yeah, you lead with this. So it's very, very frustrating. And there's actually more history there. The person that wrote that article, who's now been terminated from the organization that wrote it, was quite pissed at us for not giving them the direwolf news. And so this story came out 3 days later, and they told us how mad they were at us because they had written a very favorable article about our chief science officer, Beth, and a lot of the women that work at Colossal. And so they told us on the phone they felt betrayed that we didn't tell them the direwolf news. And we're like, well, we were going to, but then it leaked early. And so we tried to explain all that. And then magically 3 days later, there's a article that's highly politicized when we're like, hey, we're trying to do conservation work for free for the American public. That should not be a Republican, independent, or Democrat issue. That should be a
So we're going to see red wolves off the endangered
5 to 10
species?
years.
We would hope to, right? And so we're educating them. We just signed another for free for the American people MOU with the administration to biobank everything and back up everything and sequence everything so that as we lose stuff, at least we have some type of cellular and digital backup. We're now working with the administration to try to get permission on not just the red wolf, but on a handful of species that we can go clone for free and then give back to things. That deal's not done yet, but we're working on it. I'm hopeful that we will get there with the administration. I think it's a bipartisan free issue because it's like, look, we're going to do stuff for conservation for free. We're not asking to take away from money from in these productions. And so if we are successful and we get some of these green lights, which I'm hopeful we will, well, then I think in the next, not in this administration, but over the next few administrations, we could see the red wolves fully recover.
Yeah. That's terrific. Okay,
and others.
Question. So as Ben said, dire wolves 12 to 13,000 years ago. The woolly mammoth, how long ago did it become extinct?
No clue. How long?
4,000 years. Yep. Only 4,000 years.
Yeah, we were building, I always find this interesting. Humanity, not Colossal, we can't take this much credit, but we as humanity were building the pyramids at the same time. If you subscribe to the current, sorry, asterisk, if you currently subscribe to accepted archaeological timelines of Egypt, then we were building the pyramids at the same time that woolly mammoths still existed, which I think is just a cool, like, it kind of messes with your brain because most people sometimes incorrectly put woolly mammoths back into the kind of dinosaur category and there was a 65 million year gap between those.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So then on woolly mammoth, same process, but it was the Asian elephant?
Asian elephant. It's 99.6% the same genetically. And we had planned initially to make, like, based on the good news about the woolly mammoth project, right, is that it's less editing than some of our projects. It's also it's less editing than some of our projects. We had a lot of genomes. They're not quite as good as some of our genomes, like the Tasmanian tiger and others, but we had a decent amount of them, and a lot of them died in cold places, which was helpful. And so, even though they were older, so more fragmented.
And some of that went 1 million years back.
Yeah.
Right?
So our oldest is about 1.3 million years.
Wow.
Yeah, 1.3 to 1.4, depending on how you characterize it. And so, not exactly clear, but within a couple 100,000 years. And so we were originally targeting to make 65 edits. And we've now made over 130 edits on our mammoth project. So we've made nearly double, a little over, like we're in that kind of range of double of what we've done, which is what we were originally anticipating, which is great. The other thing that's been really exciting about the mammoth project, two other really interesting data points that we haven't really talked about yet, is that one, we were making them in all of our species. We initially were working on one cell line, so we're working on one genetic donor of Asian elephants. We're now working on 14 different cell lines, and so and part of that is and I can't say who yet because some of these aren't my rights to say, but we've had several governments now partner with us on specifically the Mammoth Project and lean in, but their aspirations for the project have grown. So out of the gate, they don't want one or two calves. They want a whole herd. They want them genetic diverse. And so the project's grown. And so like some of the originally our goal was to have our first calf in 2028. That's going to slip a few years now, but it's also the project has expanded.
And talk about the
and partners. And so just like when we had the direwolves, right? We did not announce them the day they were born. We announced them when they were a little bit older. There's some discussion with our government partners on this that I don't know what like people are now have been pressuring me like, okay, so what is the new date? People are, the three questions I get consistently are, when are you going to make a dinosaur? No
DNA on a dinosaur.
No DNA on a dinosaur, which makes some people happy, makes more people mad. What's the next species? It's like, I feel like we tell you a lot already. And what's the exact date and time?
How many species are you working on? Give us a round number.
So on the de-extinction side, publicly we've announced woolly mammoth, Tasmanian tiger, dodo, moa, blue buck, which is new.
Which is the latest one.
Which is the latest one we've announced. Not new that we worked on it, but new that we've announced. And then obviously direwolves, right? So 6 that we've announced from a de-extinction perspective. And so, but what's exciting is that as people have
But if we went in your laboratory, other than announced, a lot more?
There's more things in various forms of research.
Stages of
research.
Yeah. Now, and on the woolly mammoth, it sounds really neat.
Yeah.
But it's got a real benefit. If you put the woolly mammoth back up in the Arctic tundra, it makes a difference, right?
Exactly. The Arctic tundra in the Arctic Circle in what's known as Circle Polar North, which is a little bit broader than what's categorized on maps as the Arctic Circle, is a pretty desolate place, right? It's not highly carbon efficient. It's not. It does not have a plethora of flora and fauna there. And so if you look at all these ecosystem models for the power that large herbivores do to them, spreading seeds, removing brush that's not helpful for the ecosystem, nitrogen, oxygen cycling, that all of the models show, like pretty much 100% or near 100%, show that large megafauna help the ecosystems that they're in. Now, with that said, once again, this is the beauty that I get in my part of my life is I get to work with all these scientists. And even internally, we have these debates where you've got certain people like George Church that will show you the exact calculus that this many mammoths at this population density that can be supported by the ecosystem without supplemental food at this latitude will have this impact to the ground temperature. Sure. And we've seen some of those studies come out of Siberia where they've shown that the reintroduction of cold-tolerant megafauna and the removal of non-efficient carbon trees can lower ground temperatures by up to 8 to 9 degrees which is great because in the summer months it gets warmer and it thaws to a point, right? But if you have more of it cold, it only thaws down so much. So you get all of the ground layer during the summers, but then you don't, some of that permafrost that is a deep carbon sequester does not melt, right? Yeah. And so you don't have off-gassing from that. And so even internally at Colossal, we'll have people that will tell you it'll have this level of effect, we'll have people that say this level of effect. But what we found, generally speaking, is that everyone agrees that it'll have a net positive effect on kind of the reignition of that ecosystem.
But that's a good introduction. You've also, and I'll throw a couple things out. And you talk about, you've come up with a vaccine for the African, for the Asian elephant, excuse me. Yep. That is a disease that's predominant. That's a big one. You've done that.
EHV, which I'm very, very proud of this project, kills about 20% of Asian elephants' babies a year at the time of weaning. It's a herpes virus. Colossal plus a couple of our zoo partners, couple at Baylor College of Medicine.
Houston Zoo was the first one.
Zoo is one of the first ones. Exactly. Great partner that we worked with. There's several strains of EHV. The most deadly strain, we actually have a vaccine against it, and it has been tested in elephants, and it is currently conferring resistance. More testing needs to be done, but it's highly, highly hopeful. If that works at the scale we believe it works, and the data is currently showing that it will work, that distributed globally will actually have a higher degree of effect on Asian elephant conservation than all elephant conservation combined. Like that one innovation.
Yeah. Well, and then plastics is a big issue. Microplastics, everybody talks about that now.
We have braking, which we're working on microplastics.
You're braking, and you spun that off now.
We spun that off.
And what does it do?
So we this incredible team led by Sukanya out of the Wyss Institute discovered a microbe that actually creates an enzyme that breaks the chemical bonds of plastic. A lot of the plastic degradation companies and research out there really requires chemicals, pre-treatments, heating, and a lot of times it's making microplastics, which is a bigger problem than just the plastic. And so what they discovered, and then we took it into Colossal and kind of supercharged, is this microbe that creates an enzyme that breaks the chemical bonds of plastics, and then the off product of that is biomass, right? Like, so it's truly incredible what they've made. We're working now.
The enzyme actually destroys the plastic.
Destroys the plastic.
Yeah.
It breaks chemical bonds.
That was thought to be thousands of years. You got it down to
22 months.
22 months.
Right. Actually, better than that, but all we've talked about is 22 months publicly so far. And we're doing it with water treatment, with textiles, which is a huge industry.
Nylon,
nets. PET, nets, water bottles. So it's working in a lot of different capacities so far without any pre-treatment, right? Which is quite no chemical or heat pre-treatment.
So I want to jump a little bit more on the personal side.
Yeah.
How do you personally reconcile with nature's, evolution of these species and the recreation of them? Are you playing God in air quotes?
I think we play God every day. Like, I think we as a society play God when we cut down. Like, are we playing God when we overfish the oceans or destroy a coral reef or eradicate the dodo? Like, that's a form of playing God, right? So I don't look at it as really we're playing God. I look at it as we're leveraging human ingenuity and building new tools in the fight to save what was given to us, regardless of who you believe gave it to us, right?
Sure.
And so that's how we think about it. And so I think that there's nothing more just than the pursuit of leveraging innovation that has kind of this application to both conservation and inspiration for our next generation, as well as things like ourselves in human healthcare. So I always say, if you hate ecosystems but love your kids, we're inspiring them. If you hate ecosystems and your kids, but you love yourself, we're at least making there'll be therapeutical advancements that come from us to help you. And so I don't see depending on your personal scale of narcissism, there's no reason why you shouldn't like us.
Sure.
But where you are today, and today, not tomorrow, but today, you can go in using the technology, and you can edit an embryo, and you can manipulate.
And we are
not
Colossal, though.
You're not doing human.
We're not doing all of our technology. Not all. The vast majority of our technologies would be applicable to humans, but we're doing that separately under different governance.
And that's what I want to ask you about for a second, because with that technology, I can go in and I take an embryo, and which we do today. We could filter out Down syndromes, a number of different things
and
you
can look at embryo health.
But in theory, I can also start impacting the intelligence of that embryo. I can start doing other things too. So address it from a dual question. One is the ethical elements of that, and two is the security elements. Because in China, they're doing that. And they're starting to do it not unlike what the Nazis talked about back in the 40s.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, BGI, or Beijing Genomics Institute, I would argue is like the Huawei of genetics, right? Like, one of the most brilliant things that BGI did, I'm not saying it's ethical, but one of the most brilliant things they did to advance the Chinese cause was during COVID. They were like, we'll just sequence everything for free. Like, just send us to COVID. We'll help. We're here to help, right? But they got so much human data on that, right? And the leader of the head of the BGI has been very transparent, saying, "Hey, we're looking for what multi-genetic or genes working together, how that affects intelligence, how that affects health, and we plan to leverage it." Like, they don't mince words on this thing, right? And in China, you can do many things and be put away for a long time. You can do nothing and also be put away for a long time. But what you've probably heard about the CRISPR babies, where there's germline editing, meaning making edits in an embryo that would also be passed on future generations. And that guy went to jail very shortly, right? And so it's like, you do something, because the Chinese government doing, but he kind of got a slap on the wrist, right? He's now out of jail. I think there's people that have done social media in China that are still in jail, right? So germline editing a human only gets you a couple months, right? And so it's quite interesting. And so what I would say is from a technology set, the world, including Colossal, has these technologies. So it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. Colossal takes an ethical stance that while a lot of these technologies will be applicable to humans, we think those should be done with different leadership. I've not ran a drug company. I've not ran a human, therapeutics company.
Yep.
And so those should be done under different leadership with different governance. Some same investors, maybe some different investors, there's different regulatory hurdles. I think one of the things that makes the U.S. different than China is our values, right? And so I am not, this sometimes is controversial, I am not personally against germline editing for certain things, such as like if we could remove things like debilitating diseases or sickle cell anemia. I think there's a list of single gene and multi-genetic disease states that impact quality of life that should just be removed, in my opinion, from the global gene pool.
Big issues, and even now editing a live person to change hair,
exactly.
change hair color, bring hair back, change eye color. Those big issues.
I think that there's a set of things that, and the good news is I don't have to make these decisions, but I think there's a set of of diseases that I do believe that global governments and the scientific community and the health community, with empathetic oath and everything, I think that they can all agree these things are bad.
ApoE4 on dementia, things like that. Yeah.
Agree. So I do think, so from an ethics perspective, I'll close with this on this answer. I was like, I think that should be more normalized, and I think it will be in the coming years. Now, when you get into things like the stuff that's very kind of eugenics-y, like eye color, hair color, height, even intelligence, I think there should be still some things that we just don't touch.
Yeah. Two closing questions.
Yeah.
One, you're sitting here in Dallas.
Yep.
We don't normally think of Dallas as a technology and a science biocenter.
Yep.
Talk about why you're here and what you think the promise is for this area in the next decade or so in these areas.
Well, I love Texas as a whole. Born in Austin, spent time in Dallas and in Austin. And I really think that Texas is just a business-friendly state. It's got great laws and regulation in taxes. It's got reasonable, high quality of life compared to what the cost of living is. Most people don't realize this because they just think of the old, I'm sure you got this before, the old West, right? But it is a pretty diverse state, right? Like you walk around our labs,
absolutely,
it's very, very diverse, right? So you have a lot of diversity of thought. Some of the biggest companies in the world came from Dallas. Dallas as a regional hub, there's, it's big enough, unlike some of the other metroplexes in Texas, where it's got something from everyone. So if we want people with this background, they probably have a community here, right? We recruit internationally, right? And so there's something for everyone in Dallas, number one. Number two, the people are just, like outside the business friendliness, the people are just nice. Like the people are nice. I think a lot of times people think that Texas is pretty conservative. I think it's more libertarian than anything. Like generally speaking, the average Texan,
libertarian is a good way to put it.
But the average Texan does not care about, and they're not going to get in your face about your belief system as long as you're not hurting anyone else.
Yeah.
The average, you don't have that in a lot of cities. They're like, we want you to believe this conservative value.
Good point.
We want you to believe this liberal value. But in my experience, being in Texas for 40 plus years, even though it traditionally votes conservative, the average Texan is just a nice person, and they may not agree with everything you believe, but they're not going to force their will on you, right? And so I think it's a good place to raise families. And then it's centrally located. I was in New York yesterday. I got back in 2.5 hours, right? Like pretty easy, right? You can go to both coasts.
Yep.
Like we have a lab.
I used to do that all the time.
We have a lab in Melbourne, Australia, not Sydney, Melbourne.
Get there.
There's a direct flight 7 days a week to Melbourne from DFW. So I think the infrastructure of it is quite good. So I'm very pro Texas. I think Dallas. I think that, and I love Austin, but I think sometimes Austin's better at marketing Austin than being Austin. I think Dallas is terrible at marketing Dallas, but it has so much to offer.
Great way to put it. In 2 decades, 2 short decades, You've created enormous wealth. You've taken 5 companies, as we talked about, in very different areas, some common threads, but very different areas. Built those up, successfully exited those. Now you are developing a company and a technology and a science that goes beyond anything that we would have dreamed of a decade ago.
Yep.
In 50 years, you see Ben Lamm. What's the sentence that follows him?
Hopefully didn't get eaten by a direwolf or something else he made. That would be the worst sentence. Well, I hope I'm around in 50 years. So I hope other people will solve part of things with life extension. But I hope that, it was, the sentence is that, I worked on things that were really challenging and, we made a positive difference in multiple categories. I'd say that'd be my hope.
I've got great optimism that will be the case.
But I hope I'm around, so I hope people just ask me. I can just say it. Easier.
Ben, this has been a terrific conversation. Your guys over there are about ready to shoot Kyle and I because we've gone long. But it was terrific. But we'd love to do it again. Again, thank you very much. We're both going to run out and see if there's an application to do an internship.
Oh, good. You'll have fun.
We appreciate it.
It's really great.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.